Good morning. I'd like to welcome you all to Little Doe. Brother Jackie McMahon, if you would, open us up in a word of prayer.
Dear kind and gracious Lord, Lord, thank you, dear Lord, for this opportunity to come back from the past. Pray to you, dear Lord, look down upon us in a merciful way. Feed us from thy bountiful table, help us to grow in grace, knowledge, and understanding of thee, and help us become more like you today as we live. We ask that your anointing on Brother Jim as he stands before us, use him for thy glory. Help each one of us to receive that you have for us. We'll thank you, we'll praise you in Jesus' name.
Psalms 23, a psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. A table before me, thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Maybe not as quite popular as something like the Lord's Prayer, but it's still a quite popular quoted bit of text, especially the first little bit of verse 4. Yea, though I walk through the valley of shadow of death. I think, though, we often just pull this little bit of text out of context, like we do so much with text in the Bible. We will use that little blurb as a retort for a comeback, when we are experiencing a hardship that could not be avoided. Something more on the lines or tone as, yea, though I walk, through the valley of the shadow of death. Something that can't be avoided and we just must suffer through it. We often forget the rest of the verse. I fear no evil, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. It's less of the fact that we're going to have to suffer trials in life, but the fact we have the means to get through it, whatever this life has to hold against us. There's no need to fear what is to come, as God will stand by us and give us the tools to make it through whatever challenge we may face. We are just traveling through this world below. As it is not our home, or at least our permanent one, as our home is like the last verse of verse 6, in the house of the Lord forever. Unlike this earth, which will fade, our true home will be forever. Verse 5 is often read over as we go from 4 to 6. But it says, thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. In this verse, I think it makes a good example of how we are to react with the world and how the world should see us as a child of God. First, we aren't too good to not eat and be in the midst of the world. We should be humble enough to sit at the same table. And why not? We're all humans. We are no better or no worse than our neighbor. But yet there should be a difference. There should be an air of confidence, I think. Not smugness or selfishness, but a little something that sets us apart, but not something that's, through us or through our own selves. It should be the showing of God's grace and mercy. The verse 5, it says, "Thou anointest my head with oil, and my cup runneth over." We should be allowing the blessings of Christ's love show through us and give us that glow that makes people stop and stare at us. And moving back up to the top of the chapter, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." This could be two meanings. The first obvious one is, under Christ's protections, we won't have a need that goes unmet. It says, "He maketh me lie down in green pastures and leadeth me beside the still waters." What more could one ask for? But secondarily, it's maybe because we've tasted what God has to offer and we can't be satisfied with things of this world and what it has to offer. There's nothing this world has left that could compare to what is prepared for us in heaven. And kind of going on the same note a little bit, if I can get through it. If you want to follow along, it's in your green book at page 74. Kind of one of my more favorite songs. I think kind of goes along with that Psalm of David. It's kind of, I don't want to say dark, but it's kind of like off. I don't know how to phrase it. But this song is often done in a minor, and it gives a little bit of a different tune than, the traditional hymn. I am a poor wayfaring stranger, traveling through this world below. There is no sin, no toils or dangers in that bright world to which I go. I'm going there to meet my Father. I'm going there, no more to roam. I'm just going over Jordan. I'm just going over home. I know dark clouds will gather ways rough and steep, but beauteous fields lie before me, where weary eyes no more shall weep. I'm going there to see my mother. She said she'd meet me when I come. I'm just going over Jordan. I'm just going over home. I want to sing salvation story in concert with the blood-washed band. I want to wear a crown of glory when I get home to that great land. I'm going there to see my classmates who's passed before me one by one. I'm just going over Jordan. I'm just going over home. I'll soon be free from every trial. This form will rest beneath the sod. I'll drop the cross of self-denial and enter in my home with God. I'm going there to see my Savior who shed for me His precious blood. I'm just going over Jordan. I'm just going over home. I'm just going over Jordan. I'm just going over home. The term I think I was looking for was somber, not dark. Um, Christmas parade will be the 14th. There's a sign-up sheet in the back for attendance for Pizza Inn. And then the following Sunday, Christmas party at 6. And that Wednesday night on the 18th, candlelight service. I saw on the TV tonight will be choir practice and the play practice. We have a few birthdays listed. On the 8th, Randy Cobalt. 14th, we have 2. Adeline Nave and Colt Verdun. Any other birthdays or anniversaries that's not listed? Any other announcements? If there's nothing else, then you are dismissed to your classes.
Well, good morning, everybody. We'll be looking at 1 Corinthians chapter 7. I'm sure if anybody's read this lesson, you were wondering how we're going to get through this one, the discussion. There's some very good points, I think, in the lesson that we'll try to make and give you all plenty of opportunity to make them as well. Mentioned a few times, and I'll kind of say it again here, Paul must have been going off a list of questions, and I think this was one of them that must have come to him wherever he was. I think he wrote this from Ephesus maybe. And he's gotten a letter with some questions, and we've talked about the climate in the city there, and just how awful and debauched that it was. In today's lesson, you have that. I'll talk about that just here in a second. And then you have the other side, but. In the quarterly just suggested some other questions that's going to come up in the next few chapters. They even list the chapters, but besides marriage and divorce, today, eating of foods offered to idols, problem with the order of worship, spiritual gifts, taking up a collection for the poor in Jerusalem. These are just a few of the questions that may have been on the same list that we're looking at today. And of course, today's focus is on marriage and divorce and being single and relations and all this kind of stuff that Paul delicately tries to answer, and I'll delicately try to expound on it here this morning. To give some context, it's thought, and this comes from, I think the Quarterly mentions it, I read it in a couple of other places, there was a couple of trains of thought, both to the extreme in Corinth at this time. As we've already said, many of the Corinthians thought that the body was not much. The spirit was more important, and the body could just be treated in any way that you wanted. Therefore, you were free to do whatever. And that seemed to be the train of thought with the temples that we talked about last week, if you were here. And then the other side, the Corinthians, some of them thought, well, this is bad. We shouldn't even participate in any kind of relations, abstinence, celibacy, even if you were married. So this is just, I'm kind of quoting, I hadn't read this about the city, but this is suggested. Again, I don't know, not biblical, but suggested. So we'll go with that. And as to why that Paul decides to write what he wrote. And then just to a little bit more context, I want to read, before we even get started, I want to read the last verse. Our verses only go to 16. I'm going to read a few of the others, topics. I've got them written down, but because we start next week in chapter 8. But the last verse, verse 40, but she is happy if she so abide after my judgment, and I think also that I have the Spirit of God. So some of the things that he says here, I think, is biblical, how you morals, how you should do. Other things, I think he says, are more of his opinion. Now, we get it all in the chapter. We say that all Scripture is inspired by God, and I believe that. And I thought about that. A preacher will be inspired by God. He'll get a message, and he comes and he delivers that message, and some of it ultimately is his opinion. He can't. Not every single word that comes out of his mouth in a sermon is, I think, God speaking through him. I think there's some times there that, and y'all can disagree if you want, if you feel to, it's okay. But my thing here is, Paul says, this is kind of what I think. I'm going to tell you the moral part, and then I'm going to tell you what I think on some of the others. So we'll get to that as it comes, and then I'm going to go ahead and get started here. Verses 1 and 2, Paul says, now concerning the things whereof you wrote unto me, this is where this comes from, it is good for a man not to touch of the woman, nevertheless, to avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife, and let every woman have her own husband. So he is quoting, I think, it is not good for a man to touch a woman. Maybe that came, I read somewhere that may came as a direct quote from somebody, and the idea here is not just the touch, but sexual relations, and I think this is unmarried folks. They shouldn't be doing these kind of things, and I guess thinking of the celibacy part of it too. That you just don't even touch, don't do anything, whether you're married or not. And then Paul puts in the but here, or the nevertheless, to avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife, and every woman have her own husband. Now, most of the Christian religion believes this is so. I think the priests in the Catholic Church are forbidden from marrying, and I guess we kind of see how that's went over the years. Not too good. I personally don't think that's what God is saying here. In the I'll talk more about this too, but in the Jewish side, it was prevalent that you marry when you get to a certain age. So I think that Paul, even though he wasn't married himself, and I've got something on that too, but he thought that it's a good idea to get married. And as we think about it, even just the people that we know, that's kind of the path that most follow, and that is when you get to a certain age, you get married. Not just for the reasons as stated here, but for love and affection, and growing a family, and all these things. There's a lot of good reasons to be married. I have to say on the other side, it's not for everybody. Not everybody goes that route, and that's okay. That works good. Also, Paul here is not saying, that's the only reason you should get married, but it is certainly one of them, and that is to avoid fornication. He talks here about, as we go on, about how the husband and wife should treat each other. And he says, let the husband render unto the wife due benevolence, and likewise also the wife unto the husband. Interesting in verse 4, the wife hath not power of her own body, but the husband, and likewise also the husband hath not power of his own body, but the wife. So this was probably a little bit different than the thought during the day. I think the thought during this time was, the man was in charge, and it wasn't the other way around. That Paul says, oh no, this works both ways. And I think that if a marriage is successful, that's probably the reason that it is there's give and take, there's push and there's shove, not literally, but there is. We have to give and we have to take here and there, and it all works out. And then he says in verse 5, defraud ye not one the other, except it be for consent for a time, that ye may give yourselves to fasting and prayer, and come together again, that Satan tempt you not for your incontinency. I didn't read that word correctly, but I speak this by permission and not of commandment. So Paul says, don't withhold yourself from your spouse. Christian and I were given that speech by Brother Bill James when he married us, and he made that a point, and I think this is where he got that passage from. And of course, Paul says, there's times when you're praying and fasting, and he said, and I tell you that not as a commandment. I'm not commanding you to do that, but I'm suggesting to you that might be a good way to go. Again, and I'll try to point out the things that I think are his opinion more than his straight up commandment from the Bible. And I think that this is one of them. And he says, come together again, so that Satan doesn't tempt you. So I think this is good common sense things, not just marital, but good common sense for these things to do. Now, he switches it up there a little bit in in verse 7, and he talks about the idea of not marrying, and I meant to for us to look there at the title of the good time to look at that, marriage with a question mark. I guess that's to marry or not to marry is a way to put that, and this is Paul's, again, his take on things. For I would, this is verse 7, for I would that all men were even as I myself, but every man hath his proper gift of God after this manner, and another after that. So I think in this case, Paul is saying, I wish everybody could be single like me. Now, there is some ideas that Paul may have been married, and the Bible certainly doesn't say it, and we can treat it as such. We can also speculate a little bit and say that a good Jewish boy, by the time he was 20, if he wasn't married, and I read this somewhere, it was he was sinning. He wasn't doing the right thing if he had waited that long. Of course, Paul was a lot older than that. Another idea that he may have been married at one time is that he was supposedly or thought to be a member of the Sanhedrin court, and you had to be married to be on the Sanhedrin, according to some things that I read. So I think there is a possibility, we could say, that he was. Maybe his wife has died. He didn't share that with us, so he didn't think it was that important, but maybe something had happened to her. Maybe with him going in a different direction, maybe that wasn't agreeable. There's different things that could have happened. But in any case, Paul says, I'm happy being single. And I think he would say it gives me more time to further the gospel. And we all know that's the case, that if we're married, there's time for other things, taking care of the home and all this kind of stuff, raising the kids, that would, I won't say take away, but slow us down from being a full-time minister as Paul was. And he was full-time. He was gone away, months at a time, years at a time, actually, as he traveled around starting the churches on the missionary journeys and stuff. So it wasn't very prevalent for him to be married. But he says, I say therefore to the unmarried and the widows, it is good for them to abide even as I. But if they cannot contain, let them marry, for it is better to marry than to burn. Now, we've probably all heard that verse before. I didn't realize exactly it was in this chapter, and I don't think that's really, he's saying burn in hell or anything like that. He's burn with passion. It's better if you can't not contain to go ahead. Apparently, Paul was able to contain. His focus was on other things. Maybe he probably didn't have children. I think we may have heard that, but his focus was on God. His focus before that was really on the furthering cause of the Jews, as he studied there under Gamaliel, and he was a scholar really in the Jewish faith. So his focus wasn't so much on this other. That's a few verses. Somebody have promised last week I'd try to do a little better. So anybody like to say something on these few verses here we've talked about? Well, what? Yeah, it's actually in the chapter here as far as a faithful husband and I'm talking about faithful to God. One or the other doesn't. We do have that in here. Try to get to that. Somebody else. Verse 10, and to the unmarried and to the married I command, yet not I, but the Lord, let not the wife depart from her husband. But if she depart, let her remain unmarried, or be reconciled to her husband, and let not the husband put away his wife. And this is just some of the same teaching that Jesus taught. That we should try our best. I guess we'll throw that in there this morning to stay married. And then he goes on to say again. Here's one of those places where he's throwing in his opinion. He says in verse 12, "But to the rest speak I, not the Lord. If the brother hath a wife that believeth not, and she be pleased to dwell with him, let him not put her away. And if the woman which hath an husband that believeth not, and if he be pleased to dwell with her, let not her leave him." Let me go ahead and read why. It says, "For the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. Else were your children unclean, but now are they holy." Let's look at that part. And Paul says, if you're a Christian and your spouse is not, he don't really exactly say this, but I'm going to read it in. Try to make things work. He mentions children. We all know that children who have both parents all the time do better. I know it's not always possible, and I get that, but Paul is saying, if you can do it, do it. There's obviously some love there, at least in the beginning, some that started all this, and try to do that. And the reasons are maybe your faithfulness, and we've seen it happen where one of the spouses gets saved, and eventually the other one, through the testimony or through the persistence of the other, they also start coming to church, and they are saved. And then the kids are sanctified by at least one, and I say that, but I also say that if it's a woman who's saved, and she brings the kids to Sunday school and all this kind of stuff, it just makes things. It's at least a better start for the children. So Paul says, even if there's, and maybe there was a question, well, what if my husband is an unbeliever? But do I just get rid of him? And Paul would first say, well, no. Let's try to work this out if we can. But then he does say, "But if the unbelieving depart, let him depart. A brother or sister is not under bondage in such cases, but God hath called us to peace." And again, this is not something that Jesus said. This is something that Paul has said. How do we interpret this is difficult at best. I think maybe everyone has an opinion, and I guess the idea is that under bondage, that is, they could marry again, and these are things that we deal with, and that we have to, I think, make out the best we can with what we are given. Verse 16, "For thou knowest, O wife, whether thou shalt save thy husband, or how knowest thou, O man, whether thou shalt save thy wife?" And again, Paul is saying, let's stick it out. Hopefully, you can be an influence on, not only your spouse, but also your kids, if you just stay together and keep that loving relationship. That is the end of the verses that we were given. There's several other things that Paul says in here, and I'd like to make a comment on some of those. Let's look down at verse 25. It says, now concerning virgins I have no commandment of the Lord, yet I give my judgment as one that hath obtained mercy of the Lord to be faithful. I suppose, therefore, that this is good for the present distress. I say that is good for a man so to be. Art thou bound unto a wife? Seek not to be loosed. Art thou loosed from a wife? Seek not a wife. Here I think is Paul's opinion again. And if thou marry, thou hast not sinned, and if a virgin marry, she hath not sinned. Nevertheless, such shall have trouble in the flesh, but I spare you. So, I think what Paul is saying is marriage is not bad in the sight of God. Even more, I think marriage is instituted by God. When you go to a wedding, a lot of times the preacher makes a comment that, this is a godly institution put forth by God. Now he says because of the current distress, I don't know what that was, something that was currently going on there in the city of Corinth. He says, if you're married, stay that way. If you're single, stay that way. And I'm just kind of repeating what Paul has said. I don't know exactly why he is saying that. Maybe anybody got a thought on that or anything else? Yeah. I do think his conversion was different than anybody else in the whole world, and I think that helped influence his life. I mean, most of the rest of us probably not got struck down by the sunlight and on our way to Damascus and blind for 3 days from it. So I think that did influence Paul, and I believe he almost admits the fact that he, when he says, I wish you was like me, you didn't have to worry about this kind of stuff. So. The next one I wanted to look at is verse 29 through 31. He just kind of throws this one in, not really related to marriage or divorce, but he says, I guess it might be a little bit. 29, he says, but I say this, brethren, the time is short. It remaineth that both they have wives as though they have none. And they that weep as though they wept not, and they that rejoice as though they rejoice not, and they that buy as though they possess not, and they that use this world are not abusing it. For the fashion of this world passeth away. To a lot of married folks, the time is short is probably not exactly right. We probably think it's a long time. But I think that there was a verse here from Psalms 39:5. It says, "Behold, thou hast made my days as an handbreadth, and mine age is nothing before thee. Verily, every man at his best state is altogether vanity." Selah. So, Paul is saying here that whatever you do, your time here is short. And I hear that more and more, especially we kind of think about it as we get older. It seems like it was only yesterday that we were doing this, and the idea there in Psalms about the handbreadth is that much right there. That's about how much our life is. About 4 inches comparatively is the handbreadth, and it is for a very short time. Whatever we're dealing with, it's for a very short time. A couple other things, and I'll close here. Verse 32. Verse 32 through 35, let me read those real quick. It says, but I would have you without carefulness. He that is unmarried careth for the things that belong to the Lord, how that he may please the Lord. But he that is married careth for the things that are of the world, how he may please his wife. There's a difference also between a wife and a virgin. The unmarried woman careth for the things of the Lord. She may be holy both in body and in spirit, but she that is married careth for the things of the world, how that she may please her husband. I speak for your own profit, again, my own opinion here, not that I may cast a snare upon you, but for that it is comely, that ye may attend upon the Lord without distraction. So Paul just comes out and says, and here's my opinion, you can be a stronger warrior for the Lord if you're not married because of these other cares. Now, on the other side, it's good to be married because we all know that is probably the best route to take. Finally, I guess I'll stop there. I have a couple more, but I'll stop with that one. Next week we'll look at food sacrificed to idols. I think it's in chapter 8. So we'll be getting through some of this other stuff that we've dealt with for the past couple of weeks. I'll give you one more opportunity to have a comment here. Make a comment if you'd like to. Yeah, good. Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, you have to say that for sure. Well, if there's nothing else, I'll dismiss us. Our Heavenly Father, thank you for this time you've given us, Lord. I just ask your blessings on each thing that's done in our service, and just be with each of us, Lord. Be with those who are less fortunate, those that can't be here today. Just give them that special blessing. In Jesus' name,